let's get started on our Tahiti and, oops, see, I'm already screwing things up here, on our French Polynesia and Tahiti program this morning. I am broadcasting from a different location. I'm very excited. I was able to leave Thailand last week, just 1 week ago, and I am now here in, well, it was sunny until today, Austria, in the western part of Austria, and I'm here to do a reconnaissance mission on some of the trips that we have happening next year and beyond. Our live away programs in Madeira and Cyprus and Tuscany. So I'm hoping to get to those places over the next couple of months. Obviously here in Austria for our anticipated 5x5 program. And hopefully I'll slip in a trip to southern France to look into our France kaleidoscope program, including Canal du Midi. And it's certainly nice to be back here in Europe. The weather is a little bit cooler. I've been in the tropics for the last year and a half, as most of you know. And it made me think, as I was putting this trip together, every time when I put a trip together, I always kind of get lost in the imagination of the experience. And now, particularly that I'm here in this cooler climate of Austria, and I think about a place like Tahiti, you know, it just captures your imagination, no matter where you know what you're thinking about and what you're planning, and you can imagine about what it's like when you tell friends and family about where you're going. And you know, for example, if you're thinking about the trip that we're talking about in our webinar today, as opposed to saying, well, I'm going to spend October in Ottawa, Ontario. It's a lovely town. But how does that differ a little bit than if you're planning a trip to, say, to Thailand? If you tell your friends, I'm going to go to Thailand for the month of January, or maybe I'm going to go to visit Tuscany in the fall, or off on a safari in Africa. Whenever you are planning a trip, it just is you're already practically in the experience, and the excitement about it all is really part of what this is all about. And you know, there's varying degrees of excitement depending on where you're going. As I say, compare Ottawa to, for example, to think about going yachting in Tahiti, and that's what I want a little bit to talk a little bit about today. The words that conjure up the feelings of this exotic, adventurous trip about going to the other end of the planet. And so, yeah, so anyway, for all those reasons, you know, the excitement of the planning, the anticipation is why I think that you should consider joining us for this rather incredible trip. Just a little bit about me and a little bit about Wheel and Anchor for those of you who don't know me. So my name is Gordon. I've been working in the travel business for the better part of actually 30 years as of this year, hard to believe. And I have organized trips for some of the largest group travel companies in Canada, as well as for travel agencies all across the country. And I realized some years ago when we got together with Joel to start Wheel and Anchor, that what I love most of all is that experience of people who, you know each other or don't know each other, and the smile that people get on their faces, and the laughs that we have along the way, and just that sheer pleasure of experiencing a completely new place. I think, for example, for example, here on one of the shots in the picture, we were in Jordan. It was our last day of one of the last trips we did before the pandemic came along, and you know, we went up to this beautiful viewpoint looking across the Dead Sea, and just, you know, everybody's faces lit up, and it just, all of the memories of the experiences that we had, and it felt like one family, even though a lot of us didn't know each other at the start of the trip. And that is really what it's all about for me. That's the sense of what bringing travelers together is all about. I put in my trips a lot of emphasis, as those who've traveled with me before, on this idea of hospitality. In fact, so much so that I wrote this book called Heart of Hospitality. I've even got a copy here, because I studied hotel and tourism management in Austria many years back. And so I went around, and I went around the country a couple of years ago with a good friend of mine, a journalist, and I explored what it means to deliver great hospitality, and they certainly do a great job here in Austria. And I've always admired that. And so I share some of the anecdotes about what that means, and I try to bring that experience into our trips. And so I'm not going to go into more detail about that, but if you're interested, of course, you're welcome to get a copy of the book. And as I say, the sorry, I'm skipping on the slides here. About 4 years ago, I went away from the company that I had been that I had started about 20 years ago. And we were organizing trips for, as I say, for other people, for other companies across Canada. And it started with a group of Canadians who I took to India, as you see here in the picture. And, a lot of these folks, most of these folks had known each other from before, and sort of one thing led to another, and that turned into another trip. And some of the people from that trip went on another trip, and they made friends. And, here we are, a year or so later, making sushi in Japan with a bunch of people. And then some of those people went on another different trip. And as I say, this group, this community started to grow. And that is really what became the essence of what Wheel and Anchor is all about. And it's about having a great time, having fun along the way, going to some wonderful places, connecting with other people, other travelers, and also learning something about, the wonderful places, the countries around the world, and all the people that are in it. So that's really what the philosophy is all about. But anyway, leaving all that aside, talking about the joys of travel, let's get back to the subject that we came to talk about today, which is, of course, yachting in Tahiti. Now, let's be honest, if it's just a yachting trip that you want to go on, there's a lot closer places to go. There's a lot less expensive places to go, like in the Caribbean, or you can go with us on a yacht program in Croatia. But the experience of Tahiti is something that is next level. And I'm sure most of you as well conjure up your own image when you've heard about Tahiti. I remember hearing about it as a kid. And so I want to say that the experience of this is really worth every penny and every uncomfortable minute of the long flight it takes to get here. And so my first impression of Tahiti was way back, I think it was in high school, when I read the book, The Mutiny on the Bounty. We've all heard of it. It's the story of Captain Bligh. And of course, a movie was done some years ago as well. And just to give you the short synopsis about this and the relevance to our trip, back in 1787, the ship, the HMS Bounty, left England to go and collect breadfruit in Tahiti to bring it back to the West Indies, because they were going to use it as an inexpensive foodstuff for the slaves that they had back there. And 10 months later, I think it was 27,000 kilometers, stormy seas, they arrived there in the end of 1788. And you can imagine the look on these guys' faces after this arduous journey halfway around the world at the end of the 18th century. And they show up in Tahiti. And I mean, you can imagine for yourself what that would have been like. It's just like, wow, we have just landed in absolute paradise. And so what ended up happening is that the crew of the ship, they enjoyed themselves so much that when Captain Bligh then reorganized everybody, say, okay, it's time to collect the breadfruit and head back. Well, he was also a bit of a jerk, to be honest. And so the relations really started to sour, and they left. And about a couple of weeks into their journey, they were well over 1,000 miles off of Tahiti. The crew mutinied. They put Captain Bligh in a boat, and about 25 of them took the ship and went back to Tahiti because they said, that's where I want to be. I'm not going to get into the rest of the story, but I think the relevance of it is this place has such a magnetism to it that you can kind of understand why it is that they would have wanted to end up in Tahiti and to stay there. And so we're going to find out a little bit about what it was about Tahiti that had these guys want to stay. I think you kind of know the reason. There aren't many places in the world that capture this feeling of being so far removed from the rest of society and the rest of what we all know. Imagine yourself gliding past these strings of uninhabited islands and coral atolls, and they've got some volcanic peaks as well on some of the islands. This is absolutely one of those places that is truly remarkable. And particularly as travelers, we probably also have a certain affinity, or we can get to develop a certain affinity for the Polynesian people, who were considered to be some of the greatest navigators of their times. I mean, they got into these dugout canoes and sailed on the open oceans as far away as some. They're saying now that they went as far away as Antarctica. It's really quite remarkable what these Polynesians got up to. And so we aren't going to be attempting any long trips on dugout canoes, but rather I think that learning a little bit about what this friendliness, the hospitality, coming back to that idea again of the Polynesians is all about, is something that is going to resonate very strongly with any of us that come, that decide to go on this trip. And so, so in a nutshell, or maybe in a coconut husk, as they say, this trip is going to give you the opportunity to learn about this culture, learn about, see some of these incredible scenes along the way, and probably most of all, take in some of the most spectacular sunsets that you'll find anywhere. So let's talk for a second about this elephant in the room. I mean, this is sort of the topic at hand that comes up in every webinar and practically every conversation I have with members. What about the pandemic? What's happening there? How might that impact this trip? Well, I'll give you the short synopsis. So like many places like Thailand, for example, where I spent the last year and a half, the COVID situation was very stable. And then all of a sudden, about a month ago, it peaked, and they have this big outbreak. But the one thing about a place like Polynesia, being an island, much like the island that I live on in Thailand, is that they can just lock it down. And they did just that. They literally, went into this massive lockdown. And so they had this big spike up, and then this big spike back down, or I should say not a spike down, but rather a decrease in the number of cases that were happening there. And they brought the situation well under control. In the meantime, they're vaccinating like crazy. And of course, this trip is 14 months away. All of our members, of course, will be vaccinated to be eligible to go on the trip. And I think by then the situation will be well under control. And so, so I think it looks pretty good. And as I say, we're looking at November of next year. So let's talk again about the experience, and that what you would share with your friends and family if you decided you were going to come along with us to go yachting in Tahiti. This is undoubtedly one of those places that most travelers probably wouldn't get to. Why? First of all, it's a bit far for the average traveler. I mean, let's face it, most people thinking about going to a tropical destination are probably going to hit up the islands in the Caribbean, and then maybe they'll go to South America or Hawaii. But Tahiti is just one step further. And also, let's face it, it's just really expensive. And the image that gets conjured up for most of us of Tahiti is these bungalows, these huts on stilts, which is that's sort of the perfect romantic honeymoon or tropical getaway. But of course, the prices of these things in the meantime are so incredibly out of sight that it really is limited to a small percentage of the population. And also, I must say about this, that experience is great if you are going on honeymoon, which is not really relevant for most of our members, because my experience of it was that it's exciting for the first day or two, and then after that, the excitement sort of wears off, because you want to see more than just that particular resort, that particular little lagoon that you're sitting on. And so that's why we are going to be exploring this region by mega yacht. We're going to see dozens and dozens of islands. We're going to be able to swim off the back of the boat, and we're more importantly going to get not only the incredible tropical experience, but we're going to get a sense again about how the Polynesians have been able to retain this cohesive sense of culture and identity while spread across this massive area around the South Pacific, a part of which is what we're going to see. And if anybody still wants to have that experience of staying in these beautiful huts on stilts, we can certainly arrange an extension for that. at the end of the program. And yeah, we're more than happy to do that. So we're planning to go on this trip. It's scheduled for November, the first couple of weeks of November. And for many people, it might be the very first, sort of tropical getaway that we're able to do, because let's face it, this coming winter is still a little bit of a question mark in terms of how the pandemic is going to affect our ability to travel. And as such, I think that, this is sort of the ultimate first tropical trip that you could take. I mean, there's no sense lamenting on the fact that we've missed the last couple of years of travel. It's happened, the rest is history. And so this is kind of one of those trips that you almost owe yourself to take, if that's on your radar screen. And the other thing is that there's still a lot of uncertainty about what the future holds for travel. And so as an example, we had planned another exotic sailing trip to Bali and the Komodo Islands, which was going to be back last year. But of course, COVID came along and everything changed, including the fact that the ship, which is in fact the same ship as is now in Tahiti, they decided to completely change their schedule and where they were going to operate. And so it's not doing that anymore. So you just never know what's going to happen. And therefore, sometimes you just have to seize the opportunity while it is in fact there. So it seems to me like the stars or the starfish are lining up. The timing should be right. The time of the year is great. Lots of members have indicated an interest to go. So I think it's worth it to come and join us. So I'm going to talk about a few of the details now. We're going to do this a little bit differently in other webinars. I'm not going to dwell on the specifics of each day, but I want to give you a sense about the kind of things that we're going to see in Tahiti. And all of the details are, of course, in the brochure that you will get with a copy of this webinar. And I know a few of you who requested a pre-release have already gotten it already. First of all, we're going to fly into Papeete. That's the capital city, the principal city on the island of Tahiti itself. And we'll spend a few days there catching up from the jet lag, because let's face it, when you fly in that direction, the jet lag is particularly harsh. So I won't say it's the easiest of places to get to, but we'll spend a few days of relaxation, but also exploring the island, and then we'll embark on our ship and head off to see, first of all, the Society Islands, of which Bora Bora is the most famous, and then up to the Tuamotu Islands, which are quite remote, before returning back to the Tahiti archipelago itself, and that will be the end of our trip. So the first few days, as I said, is all about Tahiti itself. The way that you get there from Canada is generally via Los Angeles or San Francisco. So you fly down, take a connecting flight. There's really only 2 airlines that are flying into Tahiti currently. Perhaps that will change, but again, it's a year away. We're not sure. And then from there, we will have a good day and a half completely free, completely at leisure to catch up, as I say, from the long journey, and also to explore around and just enjoy the amenities of this beautiful hotel. We're going to be staying actually at the Intercontinental Hotel in just outside of Papeete. It's a terrific setup, and it's a wonderful place to sort of catch up and as I say, get your oops, what happened to the slide? Something went missing there. It's a good place to catch up and get ready for this great adventure that we're going on. We're going to do a couple of day trips over the other 2 days that are there. First of all, we're going to take a trip down the east coast of the island. And here we're going to see where the local sculptors make those tiki statues. We're going to see a fabulous waterfall, and we're going to get a sense of the volcanic geology of this island, right? So the Tahitian islands are all as a result of volcanoes that erupted thousands and thousands of years ago. And the biggest island, of course, being Tahiti itself, is a great example of where you can see that, because in some of the other islands in the atolls, it's not as evident. All we see is the reefs. And we're going to enjoy some of the wonderful Tahitian food. We're going to go down to Tahiti Iti, which is a small little sister island of Tahiti, at a very quaint local restaurant and enjoy the experience there. We're going to see the black sand beaches. We're going to learn all about the production of coconut oil, which is such an important product. I mean, one of the few things that they actually export from French Polynesia. And as I say, we're going to also take in some of these wonderful temples, not only here, but on some of the other stages of our trip. So after 4 nights and 4 full days on Tahiti itself, we are ready to jump on our ship, the MS Panorama 2. She's a beautiful ship. She's a 165-foot, 2-masted motor sailor. You see a picture of her here, and it's really the perfect one to be sailing around through French Polynesia. There's lots of deck space, both on top, covered down on the lower, in the covered area on the lower decks. There's a sumptuous dining area where a chef prepares us 3 meals a day. Typically, we have a great buffet breakfast and lunch, and then a served dinner. There's an indoor dining room as well as an outdoor dining room that you can see here, that's protected from the sun and from the wind. So this ship is, I think, one of the perfect ones to be able to sail through this part of the world. There's an outdoor lounge, an indoor lounge, there's bars. So considering that the ship has only 24 cabins aboard, so for a maximum of about 48 people, there's really a lot of space to be able to move around. It's not like sailing on a small catamaran, which is a nice way to go, but it's a little bit claustrophobic. Here, there's lots of room. The cabins themselves, as I say, there's 24 of them on board. They range between about 100 and 140 square feet, and they come in both double and twin configurations. So as I say, this is the ultimate way to travel around Tahiti. So the first few days of our trip, as I say, we're going to set sail and we're going to head off for the Society Islands, starting off in Bora Bora. And here, as I say, this is one of the places where we get to see some mountains, because for the most part, it's pretty flat, right? Like a lot of these coral atolls in other parts of the world, like the Maldives, they're a little bit in danger of rising sea levels, but not here in Bora Bora. And this is what makes this place particularly special is Mount Otamanu, which is right in the center, sticks out and provides a very, very scenic backdrop. In fact, we're going to take 4x4s to go around, visit some Polynesian temples, and invariably we'll pass by some of these famous overwater resorts. And it's just, the scenery is like, already you won't be able to believe your eyes. It's quite amazing. We'll cruise through a lagoon just like this one here, where we'll get our first glimpse of the vast array of marine life, stingrays, black-tip sharks, and all kinds of other things. You'll even be able to snorkel with them. You can actually snorkel with black-tip sharks. They're not they're not dangerous to humans. And here you get some of the most wide variety of marine life that you'll find anywhere, not only in French Polynesia, but in in the whole Pacific region. It's quite remarkable. From here, we'll head up to Raiatea, which has a UNESCO site, which is this open air temple called Tapatuapia. Got to get all these Polynesian names right. But, and again, this is what I like about this trip as well, is it's not just all about white sand beaches and blue water, but there are some fantastic archaeological sites here that we are scattered throughout the islands. And this is certainly, I think it's the only UNESCO site in Polynesia. The last stop on the Society Islands would be the island of Wahine, which is part of which offers the largest concentration of Polynesian temples dating back something like 1,300 years. And so we're going to cruise around again in a 4x4. We have an excursion pretty much every single day of the cruise, which is nice because again, there's more to the islands than just the beautiful blue waters that you see here. From here, we'll make the journey across the sea to the Tuamotu Islands, starting off at Makatea. And this will be the first one of our stops here. And this place is a little bit different because, as you can see, it's mountainous. And unlike the other islands, it's not a coral atoll, but rather it's an island that is basically built. It's an island of coral, if you will. And so as a result, it has a whole vast variety of bird species. In most of them are quite endangered, actually, because they're endemic only to this particular island. And we'll also not only have a chance to visit some of the beautiful beaches, but we'll go into a grotto that's part of an underground cave system, where you can actually swim inside and see the stalactites and the stalactites and the stalagmites. So on the second part of our journey now, we're up in the Tuamotu Islands, and at first we're going to be at Rengiroa, which is known actually for its pink sand beaches. And it also has this very cool unbroken circle of coral that goes almost all the way around. So it's almost like this giant natural swimming pool. And this area here also has one of the highest concentration of tropical fishes as well. I mean, pretty much anywhere in Tahiti, you're going to see marine life like you truly have never seen before. I think it rivals that of even the Maldives as far as the marine life is concerned. We're going to also visit the island of Tikehau, and from here, if we're lucky, we'll be possibly able to see some of these. You can see a giant sperm whale that is jumping out. And as I say, the marine life is going to be absolutely spectacular. Another one of the atolls that we're going to stop at is called Tetiaroa. And this was actually, this island, or this atoll, was actually bought by Marlon Brando back in the 1960s, the famous actor. And he built an eco resort, which is still very much in operation today, which is aptly named the Brando. And just to give you a sense, if you want to stay there, the starting price is $3,000 US a night. So it gives you a sense of what Tahiti is really for people who have a big budget for holidays. We're actually going to take a walking tour on a nearby islet called Tahuna, which has a massive bird colony. It's again, one of the largest bird colonies in the whole country in French Polynesia, known for their frigates and their sterns and their petrels and all kinds of other birds that I can't name. So we'll get to enjoy some of the things that some of these other folks that are paying big bucks to stay at the resort will witness. And from here, we sail back to Tahiti, back to the Tahitian archipelago, and the last island that we'll visit on our trip will be Moorea, and we'll spend part of the day snorkeling in this magnificent lagoon, swimming in these turquoise waters with the stingrays, and all of this will enable you to, just take in the glory of this incredible paradise and this incredible experience that we will have had. That is the trip in the broad strokes. As I say, you can get all of the details of each day's itinerary from the brochure. Personally, I can't think of a better place to spend the month of November. You could be stuck in Canada having coffee at Tim Hortons, or you could be yachting in Tahiti. I'm being, of course, a little bit facetious. All the details on pricing are in our brochure, again, a copy of which you'll get together with a replay of the webinar tomorrow. At this point, we have space for about 16 members on the trip. We may take more if they'll allocate us the space. The program, as with most of our programs, is pretty all-inclusive. All the meals on board ship. We've put in one shore excursion a day, and as usual, all the rest of the stuff, which again is detailed in the brochure. The only thing is there's a couple of extra shore excursions which we didn't put in, but you can take if you wish, and any other meals and beverages and so on. But as with most of our programs, it's quite it's quite all inclusive. And I wanted to mention as well that Joel was saying to me he got an email from our members, Brian and Giselle, and I'm not sure if they're on. Yes, Brian's on the webinar today. So hello, Brian. And he had quipped that they had been to Tahiti something like 50 years ago, and said that they still think it was the most beautiful place that they ever went. So Brian, I think that's quite a statement, because I know that you've been around as many of our members have. So that certainly says something about this trip. So all there is to do, if you're interested in joining us for this next year, is to give Paula a call or send her an email. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have, as usual. And if, of course, if you have any friends that you think might want to come along on the trip, I have a feeling that it's going to be very popular. It's going to probably sell out fairly quickly. And this is one of those trips, though, it's a more the merrier trip. So, I mean, I'd love if we could manage it to take the whole ship and have just wheel and anchor members all on board. And one important thing to remember is that this trip, as with most of our other trips, we have waived all cancellation fees until the end of November this year. And depending on the circumstances in Canada and around the world, that may even be extended, and I'll certainly let you know about that. So I think you know about all that, how to get a hold of us. And one question I should address that I see Fran asked here about how rough the seas are. So we are sailing in the South Pacific, and so you have constant trade winds that blow out of the southwest, so coming from the direction of Australia, and as a result, you get a pretty steady ocean swell. So the boat is always going to be in constant movement. It's not going to be very choppy and rough, like in other places, like crossing the Drake Passage to Antarctica. But if you're susceptible to motion sickness, that's something you definitely need to take into account. And we'll be happy to give you more information about that. This trip is definitely not like going on a big cruise liner. It is a smaller vessel, and so yeah, you just have to be mindful of it. But there's lots of ways that you can mitigate the effects of those rough seas. So thank you again for joining us on our webinar today. I hope very much you enjoyed it. I'd be delighted to have you along. I look forward to your questions, your feedback, and we'll look forward to catching up with you on our next newsletter, and we'll see you at our next webinar next week, I hope. So until then, have yourselves a great day.